Welcome to the OSCO LC Brake Major Service video. We define a major service as that which is performed every 1,000 hours or quarterly of service, depending on your vehicle usage. OSCO has produced a simple checklist to guide you as you perform this service, as seen here. As a reminder, all of the steps to be performed in the major service are explained in detail in the OSCO LC Brake Operation Manual. This video has been produced to aid you in understanding the operation manual in the event we could not be present to train you. The objectives of the major service are: number 1, to check and record the wear pin measurement on each brake. Number 2, to change the LC brake oil. Number 3, to replace the wiper seal located under to the side of the hub. Number 4, to re-grease the LC brake hub with non-EP grease. And number 5, to check the condition of the wheel bearings and repack them with fresh grease. Number 6, to check the fluid level of the premium pump pack reservoir and top off if needed. Number 7, to check the master cylinder fluid level. Number 8, to check all hoses, brake lines, SAR lines, and fittings for leaks or damage and repair them as required. Prior to starting the checks and services, you will need the following tools and supplies: a digital depth gauge, a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, a shop rag or two, a right-angled pick tool, a telescoping magnet, an 11/16" socket and a 7/16" socket, a flashlight, a manual grease gun containing non-EP grease, a funnel with a tip small enough to fit in the fill port of the LC brake, and finally 2 pitchers, each containing 1,700 milliliters of OSCO LC brake oil, since each brake will be getting 1,700 milliliters of OSCO LC brake oil. Prior to starting the service and checks, please ensure the LC brakes are applied with no power being supplied to the premium pump pack. Remove the key from the ignition and we're ready to start work on the brakes. Now let's start by measuring the wear pin height and recording both wear pin measurements on our checklist. Please don't forget that whatever you're doing to this brake, you need to do to the brake on the other side of the vehicle. Alright, so the next step we're going to do is measure your wear pin depth to see how much wear is done on the brake. So you're going to need a digital depth gauge to perform this. Make sure that it's set on millimeters. As you can see here, I've got it set on millimeters. And then you're going to want to go to the hub, because this is a real flat surface, and you're going to push all the way down and make sure that your gauge is zeroed when it's all the way against the flat surface. So zero your gauge, and you can see it's zeroed. So then you're going to want to take your wear pin plug and pop it out with a flathead, like so, and then take your wear pin gauge, and you don't want to go in the middle of the pin here or the edge. You want to go in between the middle and edge. So take your pin and press it against the wear pin, and you'll get your measurement, which ours is 7.64 millimeters, which is a new condition brake. Now anything over 7.62 millimeters, anything higher than that, is considered a brand new brake. So obviously this is a new condition brake. Anything 6.48 millimeters and lower is considered fully worn, and you don't want to use these brakes any further than 6.48 millimeters. It would then be time to change out your brake with your spare and send it in for rebuild or whatnot. So the next thing you're going to want to do is take your O-ring plug for your wear pin and put oil on this O-ring surface, and then you can go ahead and put it back in once you recorded your reading. Just pop it back in like so. This is our Osco brake service check sheet. You'll want to fill one of these out every time you do a minor or major service on the brakes, and we will go over everything that is on this list. Okay, so now you're going to want to make sure you have a drain pan underneath your brake, and then you can remove your hex plug from the bottom. And then you're going to let your oil drain until it's all the way drained, and then you're going to want to put your plug back in. Alright, so we're going to put our drain plug back in now that the brake's completely drained. Snug that down, and the next step is going to be remove all 6 of these nuts, cone washers, and lock washers, and pull your half shaft out. Please ensure that LC brakes are applied with no power being supplied to the premium pump pack. Remove the key from the ignition, and we're ready to start work on the brakes. Alright, so now that you got the half shaft off, you can go ahead and remove your lock screws, your lock washer, and your key nut behind the lock washer. All of that from the spindle, and then we'll move on to removing the hub. Alright, so once you get those parts removed, you can also take your bearing cone out. I use a magnet, helps. Set that aside. And now you can remove your protective cap from your hub and remove the grease zerk fitting. It's a 7/16. Set that aside as well. Alright, so now that you've gone and verified that your parking brake is set, another good thing to do is try to spin your hub just to verify that it is set, because we're going to be pulling the hub out, and if your parking brake is not set, your whole disc stack will drop and you'll never be able to get the hub back in. We release the suction in there because it creates a suction. If you don't remove that, it's going to be really hard to get the hub out. But now that I got the grease zerk out, the hub slides right out. So set that aside. And now, since we're doing a major service, you're also going to want to change out your wiper seal, which is right here. And that just slides right out. Alright, so the next thing you can do is, I'm using a right-angled pick. I'm going to reach back and grab my bearing cone, inner bearing cone, and pull that out, because we're going to be doing a bearing service. You can check to make sure your bearings are still in good working order, otherwise replace them at this point and pack them with grease. Otherwise, if these are good still, you can just, repack them with grease, clean them up. So after that, if your grease in here looks contaminated at all, you can wipe it out with a rag. However, you want to be careful not to get any grease inside here where the disc stack is. Our grease is obviously new, So we're not going to remove ours, but when we put the hub back in, we're going to be re-greasing the grease barrier there anyway. So it doesn't hurt if you want to get all that out of there and put fresh in. It's only going to make things better. Alright, so after removing your bearing and taking care of that, you're going to want to put your new wiper seal back in, but you're going to want to put some grease on the inner part, the inner diameter of the wiper seal, so when you slide your hub back in, it goes in nice and easy. So now you can pop this back in. Alright, so we got that all the way in, nice and seated. So now you can take your repacked or new inner bearing cone and slide that all the way back. Carefully, try not to get anything on that disc stack back there, like I said. And then you can go ahead, grab your hub, and slide that in. It's easier if you hold it at an angle because these splines need to be lined up, and then you can push it all the way in as far as it'll go, and then you can put your outer bearing cone back in, your lock washer and keyed washer. So in order to set the wheel bearings, we now have to release the parking brake, which you have to do with the door closed since your door switch wire is hooked up. So we're going to reach in through the window like this and turn your engine to battery power, and then you're going to want to use your tow mode function to release the brake. Alright, so after releasing the brakes via your tow mode function, come out here and make sure that your hub spins freely. Then you're going to want to torque your adjusting nut down to 59 Newton meters with a torque wrench like I've got here. Alright, so that's at 59. Now you're going to want to spin it back and forth a couple times to work those bearings in. And then back off the adjusting nut again. And then reset it back to 59 Newton meters. Okay. Then you can spin it a little bit again. Now, what you're going to want to do from here is adjust your adjusting nut witness marks with the closest witness mark in the spindle groove here. So this is my closest one, so I back this off a hair and line that up with that mark, and then in turn the other two spindle marks will line up where your locking screws will go back in. So go ahead and do that. Alright, so as you can see, this was my closest witness mark, so I backed my adjusting nut up just a hair so that that's lined up there. And then you've got the other two witness marks that tell you where to put your lock screws. So I tighten those down, and we're done and ready to move on to greasing the hub. Alright, so with your parking brake still released, as you can see here, you're going to want to grab a grease gun, and it's got to be filled with OSCO approved grease. This whole entire grease barrier area behind the hub here uses approximately 400 grams of grease. A list of the approved greases can be found in our installation manual, and that's because the grease used in our grease barrier cannot contain EP additives. Now our grease barrier here is already full, but normally you'd be squeezing a long time to get this full, but you'll know when it's full because the grease will seep out around the hub here at the wiper seal. So you'll see it. It could be down here, it could be up here. it's going to start seeping out, and when it does, you can stop. Alright, so with your parking brake still released, as you can see here, hub's moving freely, you're going to want to put your grease zerk fitting back in, and that's that 7/16. So it can be a little bit of a challenge to get it started. Socket off, it'll make it a little bit easier to get it in there. Tighten it down. Okay, then the next step, what we're going to do is hook your grease gun up with the grease fitting at the 12 o'clock position, and you're going to squeeze grease into here until you see grease coming out of the wiper seal, and it can come out anywhere around this whole hub here. So just keep an eye on that. I'm going to start pumping. And as you can see, I already have grease coming out. So now I can disconnect my gun and wipe all this excess grease off. And then what you're going to want to do is turn it to the 3 o'clock position. Put your grease gun back in and pump it till you see it come out again. And as you can see, it's starting to come out again. Around here, wipe it off. Turn it to the 6 o'clock position. Pump it up again a couple times. You'll see the grease coming out. Wipe again. Turn to the 9 o'clock position. Pump it up a couple times until you see it coming out. See it coming there. Wipe it off, and then you're going to end up back at the 12 o'clock position with a couple more pumps. And this verifies that you get all the grease in full behind the grease barrier and get rid of all the voids of air that could be back there. So now you just want to clean it up and put your red protective cap back on. Alright, so please go ahead and put your gasket and your half shaft, your cone washers, and nuts back on, and then you're done with this section. Alright, verify that your drain plug is screwed in and tight, and then you're going to want to remove your eye level port plug. Set that aside and remove your fill port plug. And set that aside. You're also going to want to make sure you have a drain pan, because when you fill the oil up, you're going to fill it up till it comes up to the threads inside the oil level port. So you're going to get some seepage that's going to want to drip down. Alright, so go ahead and get your bucket of LC oil, because that's the only oil you can use inside these brakes, and fill it 1700 milliliters, as you can see there, and then you're going to want a funnel that'll fit in that top fill plug port. Now go ahead and put your funnel in and take your LC oil and start filling the brake. What you're going to want to do is keep an eye on this. Even if you've got a flashlight, you can look in there. Once it starts coming over those threads, you're going to want to stop adding oil. Now here comes the oil. seeping out. So when that comes to a drip, then you can go ahead and put your eye level port plug back in, take your funnel out, and put your fill port plug back in. Alright, so the next thing we're going to check is that our fluid level is okay in our premium pump pack reservoir. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is remove the outer cover plate, the 4 bolts, to remove the cover plate off the front. And then you can look at your reservoir and make sure that with the park brake applied, the pump pack off, that your fluid level comes to that second dimple on the reservoir. Okay. Now if for some reason your fluid level with the park brake set is not at the second dimple, you're going to want to make sure you check for leaks in the system, for one, but two, you're going to want to top off your fluid in that reservoir by adding more of the ATF fluid. The next thing to check is that your .3, .4, whatever kind of brake fluid you use in your master cylinder, make sure that it's full to the max. If it's not, you might also want to check for leaks in the system. The next thing we're going to check in our major service is that all of our vent hose lines are still secured, P-clipped, no damage present, as well as your SAR brake line and your service brake line. So your parking brake line and your service brake lines also need to be checked for any damage, bends, nicks, anything you can see. Make sure all your P-clips are intact, just like the vent hose, and follow those all around. You can also check for leaks at this point. If you see any leaks, obviously you're going to want to take care of that. After checking all your plumbing and vent lines, you're going to want to check out your vent filter, vent hose filter, and make sure it's not full of fluid or anything like that. If it is, you're going to want to change it out. Make sure it's not damaged, and make sure it's still secured to wherever it was mounted originally. Alright, so the final checks we're going to do are going to be from inside the cab. So get in the truck and start up the engine. And then go ahead and push your e-brake button in and turn the pump on until it's pressurized. And then you're going to want to check your brake pedal feel. I know that's hard to see, but you want to verify that your brake pedal's still not traveling too far, etc. You might need to bleed the brakes if it is. And then from there, what you're going to want to check is that your door switch wiring is still in effect if you installed it that way. So by opening your door, your parking brake should automatically set if you enabled this feature. So the final check we're going to do is turn the engine off and put it in the on position, so it's just running on battery power. And then you're going to want to push your red button in and turn it, and make sure that your pump pack doesn't fire up. This is checking to make sure that your engine oil pressure switch wiring is still intact and working properly. If you turn this red button and the pump pack fired up, then the wire's not sensing your oil pressure switch, and you need to check that out. Also, please verify that your warning sticker that came with the Osco brake system is still intact and legible. That way the drivers know that the vehicle is to be operated in four-wheel drive only. Now that concludes our LC brake service tutorial. Please be sure to check out our LC mini manual as a quick reference guide. Now we also have our LC operator manual on our website if you would like more in-depth information. Our website is www.oscoproducts.com. That is www.auscoproducts.com.